Saxby.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Energy Bill is a critical piece of legislation for delivering a cheaper, cleaner energy system and to increase investment into clean energies. Indeed, as the new department is named Energy Security and Net Zero, one hopes it will deliver on both. I do not need to rehearse the challenges we face of how being overly reliant on imported gas has created higher energy prices, and much more needs to be rapidly done to improve our energy security. If we create the right legislative framework and invest in renewable and sustainable energy supplies, this should ensure that we also achieve the goal of moving towards net zero. There is much to welcome in the amendments from the other place. I wish to speak particularly to clauses 272 and 273, the former local electricity bill, backed by 318 MPs, 125 on this side of the House, to enable community groups to sell electricity to local customers. It is still bewildering to me, living somewhere sunny, windy and with a huge tide, why this has not progressed sooner. Clause 272 sets up a community and smaller scale electricity export guarantee scheme to provide a guaranteed income for the electricity from small scale renewable energy generators with a capacity below 5 megawatts. Surely, with dramatically rising energy prices and a system currently still reliant on fossil fuel imports, new local, secure, low carbon generation should be desirable. Clause 273 sets up a community and smaller scale electricity suppliers services scheme which would enable communities that wish to sell the electricity generated to the local community. This would facilitate a community energy tariff that can be offered to consumers local to the site. Locally generated electricity would reduce our dependence on imported energy and increase the resilience of domestic energy supply. It could help cut bills and help save emissions. There is huge support for these amendments across this House, and I do hope that ministers will ensure they remain in the bill. These clauses have previously been opposed by ministers on the basis that they amount to a subsidy. However, this would only be the case if the guaranteed price was many times the price of other sources, but that's not what these clauses do, with a suggested rate of around 5 to 10p per unit. And it seems bizarre to me that these same ministers are still quite happy to subsidise the burning of trees and woody biomass, creating one of the biggest emitters of carbon dioxide in the country, and that we are subsidising that to the tune of £1.7 million per day. Even advisers to the plant have detailed that it should reassess its criteria for determining carbon neutrality. We are seemingly keen to subsidise this polluting form of energy at a time when I'm sure we're working towards net zero. Yet there seems to be far less subsidy for some of the genuine renewables that we could make right here in the Celtic Sea, for example. I declare an interest as chair of the APPG. But this year's contract for difference auction is expected to deliver less than half the renewable capacity to hit our 2030 offshore wind target, all due to an administrative strike price not keeping pace with rising supply chain and financing costs, and a department that has said they did not believe the industry's figures. As the Crown Estate gets ready to launch their next leasing round in the Celtic Sea, aiming to capture 4 gigawatts of floating offshore wind, I rather hope we will be able to help get these floating offshore wind turbines out to sea than subsidise the burning of trees to secure our future energy supply. Indeed, it is inconsistencies like this that make me supportive of new clause 271, which would place a duty on Ofgem to consider net zero. Investment and subsidy decisions would hopefully then ensure that the true environmental impacts of the energy produced is considered. Clause 204 on improving energy efficiency standards in our home is hard to argue with. However, the practicalities of this is already seeing long-term landlords move to short-term holiday lets in locations like my beautiful North Devon constituency. We need to ensure any move to improve energy efficiency applies to short-term holiday lets as well as long-term rentals. You still use energy and emit CO2 when you're on holiday. However, I have concerns about a blanket imposition. In rural and coastal Britain, our housing stock is older and draftier, and indeed it's harder to bring up to newer standards given planning restrictions. We need to better understand rurality, and I will be supporting any amendments that are laid by my right honourable friend, the member for Redroof, as it does seem bewildering to me that we were requiring all off-grid properties to adopt air source or ground source heat pumps when we could enable those with oil boilers to convert to hydrogenated vegetable oil at a fraction of the cost. The fuel cost is currently prohibitively expensive, but given the government has long recognised the value of renewable fuels such as HVO in the transport sector through the Renewable Transport Fuel Obligation, surely it is possible to devise a similar incentive mechanism extended to the use of renewable fuels in domestic boilers for off-gas grid properties. This could be achieved by some tweaks to Clause 101 of Part 3 of the Energy Bill. We really should be able to support community energy generation, given the abundance of renewable energy sources, particularly in the rural southwest. And we must focus scarce subsidies onto fuels that are truly renewable and work to harness the wind in the Celtic Sea, which in turn will support the UK's longer-term energy security strategy. There is much to commend in this bill, but I hope ministers will look favourably at these amendments and recognise that whilst energy security is vital, we also need to work towards net zero, and some of the current subsidies, frankly, risk delivering the opposite outcome.